longer, so that's a good sign of things to come. So every one of you, I know we have some sitting. If they take a seat, I know we want to be able to have a good meeting this morning. He asked that we have a meeting where we can share with him some of the needs that you're seeing in your respective fields, things that you're seeing that for policy and different laws that may need to be either addressed, tweaked, or actually submitted for consideration, that he wanted to hear from you. So y'all are here by special invitation. Y'all obviously play key roles in our community, and I appreciate y'all coming today. I want to ask Congressman Fleischmann actually if he would introduce his staff, because we know you're busy a lot and your staff's who we're going to be interacting with. So I didn't know if you or your chief of staff would like to introduce themselves so we'd know who to correspond with. I'm just going to turn it over to Congressman Fleischmann. Thank you for visiting with us today.
Thank you, Mayor. See you. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you all for coming out. Gosh, it's kind of like church. Everybody wants to sit in the back. I promise not to bite or to pass the plate. Good to be with you all today, and it's great to be back in McMinn County. Mayor Gentry, I want to thank you for your hospitality. When I was a candidate, obviously I was a sitting congressman in the 3rd district, but McMinn County was in the 2nd district then, and Mayor Gentry and Sheriff and many of you all were so kind to me as I came through McMinn County time and time again. And yes, it is great to be back now as the official congressman for McMinn County, and I thank you. Normally I don't travel with a tremendous entourage. If you remember, usually it's just me or one other person, but as part of my commitment to service in the entire 3rd district, I wanted to bring several people with me today to introduce them to you all. The first person I wanted to introduce is my Chief of Staff, Jim Hippie. Jim Hippie is from Nashville, great Tennessean, has a law degree from Vanderbilt University, and served with Senator Frist as his majority, when he was in the majority leader, and worked at the state legislature level. And then we like to promote from within in our office. He was my legislative director and helped me introduce and draft some key legislation last Congress, and now he's been promoted to my chief of staff. He came in from Washington because we are doing these mayor roundtables throughout the new counties, and we're going to do the existing counties next time. But I wanted to get out and make sure that everybody knew I was prepared to keep my commitments to the new counties, particularly to McMinn County. Maxine Gerner, there's one strong commitment I made, super strong commitment. Maybe that Second Amendment out during the campaign trail, and that was to keep an office open in Athens, Tennessee. And we have done that. Now there was another commitment that I really couldn't officially make because it was against the law. I couldn't say that I was going to keep Maxine, but I really wanted to say it. And I really wanted to do it. And fortunately, Maxine has been kind enough to stay on. As you know, she worked with Congressman Duncan and Congressman Duncan before that, and she's been a great asset and has really helped us hit the ground running. And yes, we have our office proudly, and I tell everyone across the 3rd district, I have a Washington, D.C. office, a Chattanooga office, an Oak Ridge office, and an outstanding office in McMinn County, Tennessee. Bob White is with me. He was my field director. We have promoted him to deputy chief over the district, so you'll see him with me quite a bit. He'll be traveling with me. And I'm here to basically do several things. Talk a little bit about me and what's going on in Congress, but most importantly, I want to hear from you all. You all are the leaders in McMinn County. Many of you all are public servants like me. And I have said this time and time and time again. Back when I was running for office in 2009, and I believe it fervently now, the best government is local government because it's government closest to the people. I've seen Mayor Gentry work very hard in my short tenure as a candidate, and now in my capacity as a congressman. He works hard, but he knows when he's at the supermarket, he's going to see his constituents. He knows when he's in church, he's going to see his constituents. It's local government that's closest to the people. He's got to pass a budget. He's got to be fiscally responsible. And yes, Mayor, I am super proud of our county in McMinn County, the job that you all have done. No debt. You balance your budget. You're a shining example for me in Washington, D.C., and that's tremendous work. I worked very hard in my first term in Congress. I was in the 112th Congress, was elected in 2010, and it was an interesting experience. And there was a learning curve, sure there was, but it was a very short learning curve because you dive right in. You start voting your first day, you start working in committees, and you start meeting with your clients, and you learn the district. And I worked very hard then. I wanted to make sure that when I went to Washington, we could turn this nation around. Candidly speaking, we've got a debt problem in Washington, D.C., and it's a very serious debt and spending problem. We're spending too much money. We've just passed $16 trillion worth of national debt, and it's going this way. And we've got to do something about that. And I had to study this problem because when you go to Washington, you know you've got a spending problem, but you've got to find out what. Where are you spending the money? Now, whether you're a family, a business, a local government, I think you should have a budget. So one of the first votes I took in this new Congress was to vote for no budget, no pay. If Congress does not pass a budget, every member of Congress, including myself, should not get a paycheck. We voted for that and we passed that, and that's very important. I think we need to have a budget. I think we need a balanced budget amendment to the federal Constitution. Not only did I vote for it the first time, I'm a co-sponsor of that this time. We've got to get our fiscal house in order. We owe that not only to the taxpayers and citizens of this country, but to our future generations. Because when you have debt, and it mounts and mounts and mounts, that is debt that we're going to pass on to our children and grandchildren. That's unforgivable, and it's wrong, and that's what we need to work on. And that's what I'm working on. I was on several committees in my first term in Congress. I was on the Transportation Committee, the Science Committee, for a while the Natural Resources Committee. I like to tell people I get traded a lot, but I get traded up, and that's a good thing. And I have been appointed to the House Appropriations Committee, and I want to talk a little bit about that and the significance of that. Congress is broken up into committees. The House is and the Senate is. And the House Appropriations Committee is critically important. It handles all of the discretionary spending in Washington. Very important in the House. And let me break that down. When I said I went to Washington and talked about where we're spending the money, if we had a pie chart, let me draw a little pie here. All right. We're going to say 2/3 and 1/3. 2/3 of our spending is mandatory spending. That's spending we can't get away from as a government. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on the national debt. We're locked in. We have got to spend those dollars. There's 10,000 baby boomers a day going on the rolls of Social Security. So we know where we're spending money. 1/3 of the budget is discretionary. That's basically everything else. Now, in the first Congress, I introduced a bill called the Freeze Government Spending Act of 2012. And what it basically said was, we've got to address the discretionary side. And what it did, it cut spending to pre-President Obama levels and then froze it for 10 years. Now that didn't pass. Neither did my balanced budget amendment push for balanced budget amendment to the federal Constitution, but we've got to keep trying. I'm persistent. Talk about persistence, and now we'll make it very local. Your mayor does a good job. Matter of fact, your mayor does a great job. Mayor Gentry, I didn't know too long, but we had the chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee, Chairman Miller, come in. I had several chairmen come into the district for me. But we got a call. We were going to meet over in Roane County. I said, well, the mayor of McMinn County wants to come over and meet with you all. Well, gee whiz. Why? But come on over. Well, I sat there at that meeting, and ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Gentry laid out to the chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee the problems we had getting a clinic in McMinn County. It was important to him, and lo and behold, it was very important to the chairman. And very quickly, it got approved. It was amazing. It was less than 30 days, Mayor. That's the kind of mayor you've got. And I was glad to meet with you then. So was the chairman. And when I'm on the House floor, I will see the chairman from time to time on the Veterans Affairs Committee. And he'll ask, hey, how's the progress in that McMinn County Clinic? It's amazing. He's over the whole United States for that, but he'll ask me about that. So that's the kind of impression you made. And as you know, we've made some progress. I think it's going to be probably September or so before we get, finally they've got the bids out and things like that. They've done the advertisements with the contractors. It's work in progress. But that could have been stuck in limbo but for your mayor's action. So thank you, Mayor. Want to talk a little bit about the Appropriations Committee, and then I'm going to open up for questions. Most committees have subcommittees. The Appropriations Committee is a large committee. It's a very important committee. As I said, it handles all of the discretionary spending. I'm committed to fighting waste, fraud, and abuse in Washington, D.C. I've already introduced 2 bills in the new Congress. And one of them does this. It's plain and simple. If a government agency is going to spend $25,000 or more on an event, they have got to have the head of that agency approve it as necessary. They have got to come to the American people within 30 days and show us where they spent their money. And every year they've got to lay out the money they spend. Why? I got a budget in Congress. We get so much money as a congressman we can spend. My first year, I didn't spend it all. I turned back over, well, about $80,000 to the Treasury. For 2012, I'm turning back over $100,000 to the Treasury because it's the right thing to do, be fiscally prudent. Well, when those folks had a party and spent almost $1 million and were laughing about it on TV, I think y'all saw the videos, I was outraged and you all should be outraged. They shouldn't spend our money like that. My bill does that. And you're going to see bills from me trying to fight waste, fraud, and abuse all across the federal spectrum. The American people deserve better. Hardworking taxpayers like you all deserve better. But remember this. For every dollar we're spending now at the federal level, whether it's on a program on the mandatory side or on the discretionary side, we're borrowing 42 to 43 cents of that dollar. That adds on to the debt. That is not good. So we've got to get more fiscally responsible. And that's what we're doing. My commitment to all the counties, and I've got 11 counties and I love them all. My commitment is to be back often, and I will do that. I will come back and visit often. I'm glad to be here. I was here an awful lot after the election. And I love Athens and I love McMinn County. It's just a beautiful place. And it's a great place to represent. Candidly, you all make my job a lot easier because what is a representative? What's a congressman is a representative, right? When I represent people like you all, that makes my job a whole lot easier in Washington because I've got 434 other members of the House who may not be as fortunate to have folks like you all to represent. You're doing the right thing. You're fiscally smart, you're fiscally and socially conservative, you're strong Second Amendment supporters. You all make my job a lot easier. With that, I'm going to open up for questions.
Congressman, I should have allowed everyone to go around the room and introduce themselves so you know who you were speaking to, and I apologize for that. If you want to do that now, that'd be so you'll know the different cities that are represented here. And
absolutely, let's do that, and I will take notes. We'll start. Front row, radio station, right?
Mark Leffler, WYXI and the Morning Facts, and my wife Mary.
Pleasure to have you all. I did radio for 10 years in Chattanooga, WDOD, the Dynamo of Dixie.
That's
and
right.
I love radio. Yes, ma'am.
Ann Davis, Vice Mayor, Athens, City of Athens.
Lois Priest, Mayor of Nyota.
Nyota, wonderful.
I'm Mike Frazier, Director of Schools at Etowah City.
Yes, ma'am.
Jennifer Cathy with the EPA.
Yes, sir.
Mitchell Moore, City Manager of Athens.
Let's see. We'll start at the back row. Yes, sir.
Jerry Anderson, Assessor of Property.
Dan Bride, work for Jerry, Property Assessor.
Valerie Pickle, I work in the Register of Deeds under Cheryl Ingram. Jan Moses, I work for Jerry in the assessor's office.
Debbie Elsie, I work for Jerry in the assessor's office.
Deborah Cox, Director of Veterans Affairs.
Cheryl Ingram, the Register of Deeds.
Dan Evans, McMinn County Highway Department.
Phil Tobin, McMinn County Trustee.
Matthew Gravely, City Manager, Etowah.
Tim King, McMinn County Commission.
Charles Slack, Etowah City Commissioner and McMinn County Commissioner.
J.W. McPhail, County Commissioner.
Where, sir?
McMinn County.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mickey Blevins, Director of Schools, McMinn County.
Fred Underdown, McMinn County Citizen. John Walker, Mayor of Calhoun.
Jamie Moses, out of Inglewood County.
David Cruz, McMinn County Commission.
I'm Gary Mason, Commissioner. I'm also a farmer. If you get a chance, mention the corn bill.
Sure. Glad to.
Bill Holbrook, McMinn County Commissioner.
Great, well, thank you. Briefly about my three subcommittees, before I take questions. I was appointed to the Energy and Water Subcommittee, which will be very important for funding DOE, a lot of what we do at Oak Ridge, the Chickamauga Lock, and things like that. The Homeland Security Subcommittee that funds all of the issues involving our Homeland Security to keep us safe nationwide. Then the third committee was a very large committee, really a surprise to me, and I was glad I got it, was Labor, Health, and Human Services, which also funds education. It was all federal education. So I know Director of Schools is here, fund things like Head Start, but it's a very broad and diverse committee. Centers for Disease Control, National Institute of Health. It's actually the second largest subcommittee on the Appropriations Committee. So I'm going to be busy. But with that, please, I'd like to open up for questions.
There's a few of us farmers in here.
Sure.
If you could,
What questions about the Farm Bill?
yes, sir, but.
Well, the chairman of the Agriculture Committee is a friend of mine, very nice gentleman, and he worked very hard on a farm bill. And as you know, as part of the fiscal cliff deal, there was an extension of that. The biggest danger that we faced there was if something was not done, we were literally going to revert back to the 1949 law involving milk. And it was not a joke. The price of milk would have skyrocketed. And that was avoided. And so the Farm Bill has been extended. And in the 3rd District, as you all know, there are tremendous agricultural interests and assets. And whenever I'm out, I love to go by the Farm Bureau and visit. But it does me better to always hear from farmers. What are your specific concerns? I was, for this particular area, when the chairman told me that it was not a joke that the price of milk could have literally doubled, and we would have gone back to that law, that was very concerning.
Well, my concerns, I guess what really burned me was they were just using milk alone as the example. And it made us look like we were the problem, but it really wasn't. The way the price of milk is determined is obsolete. That's all I'll say about that. But it made us look like we were the bad guys.
Well, I can tell you this, in our discussions, we are very pro-farmer. We are very pro-agriculture. So I can assure you, in the discussions that we were having during that Farm Bill debate, never once did we think that the farmers were anything else but potential victims in this thing, and we had to work very hard. We heard from our constituents nationwide, and what I would like to do, Commissioner, if you would do that, if you would get with Bob White, who is my Deputy Chief. I'll actually get with Maxine and she'll set that up. Maybe we can sit down and you can explain to me a little bit about how that price of milk is and the obsolete thing, so I can get a little bit better grasp. The good news is we did finally get a farm bill, and that was avoided. Yes, ma'am.
Unfunded mandates from both state and national levels, a big concern for all of us.
Sure. One of the reasons I went to Washington was to fight unfunded mandates. And an unfunded mandate, plain and simple, is when a government body, typically Congress, passes a law and says a state or a local municipality must follow it. And sadly, they end up having to pay for it. I think that's bad government. And it's unfair to local and state governments for the federal government to do it. I was very fortunate. As you know, I'm very passionate about transportation and road building and infrastructure. We need great roads in this state. I think we're in very good shape the way things are. I worked hard to pass a transportation bill in the last session of Congress. That was actually one of our few good accomplishments. Now, I wanted a long-term bill. I wanted a 5-year bill, and I actually advocated for that because you've got to be able to plan. When you're building roads, it's difficult to do that when they say, well, we might give you a year extension or something like that. As our commissioner knows, it's tough to do. What we did in the transportation bill, we actually got more money sent to the states and more state control over that. But there was something that we did. The Federal Highway Safety Administration came up with an idea. Now, I'm always fearful when government bureaucrats come up with ideas. You know, they're always there to help you, but not really so. They come up with an idea to change every road sign in America. Red signs, blue signs, green signs, said they're going to be changed by a certain date. And guess what? The state was going to have to figure out how to pay for it. And the local government's going to have to figure out how to pay for it. Well, I thought that was wrong. It was an unfunded mandate. So Jim and I actually got together, my now chief of staff, my then legislative assistant, actually legislative director, and we came up with a law that said, leave the signs alone, let them age out, no unfunded mandates. It was a common sense idea. The Federal Highway Safety Administration backed off within about 30 days. We saved the state of Tennessee $50 million to fight that unfunded mandate. And to show you, saved the state of California $500 million. The point of the story is when the federal government legislates, we have to be very careful, and I will continue to fight against those unfunded mandates. One of the reasons I have fought Obamacare so hard, I have voted to either repeal or to defund Obamacare about 32, maybe 34 times, is because of the tremendous unfair pressures and burdens it's going to put on state governments, and we've seen it already. And I'm going to continue to fight that, but anytime I can, I will fight unfunded mandates. Yes, sir.
Of course, one of all of our biggest concerns is safety in schools. And I'd kind of like to know how you all in Congress are addressing not just the safety issue, but ways of funding for schools. And I know that that'll be passed on to the state as well, but what are your discussions in Washington about school safety?
Absolutely. Well, school safety is a priority. Safety for our children is a priority and for our society. And your sheriff was here earlier. He does an excellent job here in McMinn County keeping the citizens safe. And there's a great debate going on right now. And let me say this. There are some in Washington who wish to fight to repeal the Second Amendment. They want to curb Second Amendment rights. I'm here to say I made a commitment, a strong commitment, to keep the Second Amendment rights of our citizens safe across this nation. And I've heard this in town halls. I've heard this in the meetings I've had this week. The people of the 3rd District have told me loud and clear, and I believe fervently, that the Second Amendment is part of the Bill of Rights, it's part of our Constitution and needs to remain strong. Having said that, there are some crazy people out there who have done some very horrible things. And what we need to do, and we're having a debate right now in Washington, how to deal with mental health issues, how to keep people safe in the schools. But for me, and for the people of the 3rd District who I've heard loud and clear, trying to curb our Second Amendment rights is not the way to go. And so we will have a debate on that. We will hear from a lot of folks. Ultimately, we will work with our partners in state government, and they will pass certain laws. A lot of education, as you know, is left to the states, and should be. I'd rather have more education left to the local level than in the hands of Washington bureaucrats. So we will have that debate. Obviously, I want all Americans kept safe, but one of the best ways to keep Americans safe is to have a strong Second Amendment.
I got a question about funding for the national debt.
Yeah.
I understand most of that $16+ trillion is funded by short-term bonds. What I'm wondering is, in a time where we have historically low interest rates, would this not be a time to lock in a long-term bond to secure that debt at a rate that you know is not going to go up over the next 30 years, so that you can plan for how to pay for that?
Okay, thank you. Great question. The national debt. Let me talk about what happens with debt. And this is why I'm adverse to debt. I was adverse to debt when I was a small business person. Our county here in McMinn County, thanks to your mayor and our county commissioners, let's share the credit, is debt-free. Our state has to balance its budget, Tennessee, by constitutional amendment every year, debt-free. Very important. There are states in this country that can't pay their bills because they didn't balance their budget. What happens in Washington, and I'm so glad that you raised this, is when we have debt. My dad fought in World War II, he's still living. When we funded our debt to fight World War II, which was a proper thing to do, Americans bought war bonds. We funded our own debt. American citizens held their own debt. What's happening now, sir, as you know, is other countries are buying our debt. They're financing us, whether it's China or England or Japan. They're buying up our debt. And every time we have this debate and that ceiling goes up, first of all, there's got to be somebody to buy it. But sadly, more and more of our debt is being bought up by foreign powers. That's why we've got to get this under control. The mechanism that we use, obviously, they've got, I'll tell you the games they were playing. Before there was an extension for about, a short-term extension for a couple months in this debt ceiling recently, we didn't know. The Treasury Department of the United States would not tell Congress how they were funding things and where they were funding the money. It was unbelievable. We could not get that information. So we were flying blind. Could you imagine that? They said, well, we'll take the money from here or there, and eventually we passed it, and we're going to have to deal with this coming up. So the funding mechanism, yes, whether it's long-term or short-term, you're going to have people there to buy that. And interest rates are low. And God forbid, if we ever see, if you're a borrower, and it's never good to be a borrower, if you're a borrower and interest rates ever go up, what is that going to do? On that chart I showed y'all on the 2/3 side, mandatory spending is interest on the national debt. So we've got to deal with that. And we're going to have to actually address that. But the key is, let's get fiscally sound. Let's start to put in some measures so that we can curb the growth of the national debt. It is skyrocketing, and it's skyrocketing because we're spending and borrowing. And it's not a revenue problem. Never fall into that trap. If you fall into the trap that some people try to sell, that if you only raise taxes on some people, that is a drop in the bucket. We've got a spending problem in Washington, D.C. Both parties know it. The president knows it, and it's high time that we get together and curb our appetite for spending. Thank you. Yes, sir. Mr. Tobin.
As we approach the debt ceiling again, my concern is we don't hear a lot about it. Does the speaker have a plan to cut spending? I don't think anybody in this room really understands where we are as far as what the Republican approach is to spending. And just like the Hurricane Sandy bill, you know, the law you all passed, the fiscal cliff bill, you know, to increase taxes on everybody over, what, $400,000? The revenue gain from that was $40 billion. The Congress spent $50 billion, that whole tax increase, they spent that on one bill. And there was items in that bill that were for Alaska, that were for, how can we stop that? How can you, and I think if the people of the country knew that, they would be outraged. But I don't see a concise plan that the Republicans have to say, we're going to do this. I know sequestration is going to probably happen. It looks like. I don't know how you feel about that, but you think that'll happen, or?
It's up in the air, and that's part of it. Let me try to address this, and if you'll bear with me, and then please ask some follow-up questions. When we're talking about the budget and where we were, in the last Congress, last year, as part of the debt ceiling to be raised, there was a bill that I did not vote for, and I didn't vote for it for several reasons. Because it wasn't going to cure the problem of additional spending. It was going to create a panel of 12 people, 6 senators and 6 congressmen, to sit down in a room and try to figure things out. And if they didn't figure things out, there was going to be something automatic called the sequester, which would mean automatic cuts to defense, Medicare, and some other programs, if they didn't work it out. Well, I didn't like the idea of ceding or conceding my authority of my constituents to a panel of 12. I didn't think this panel of 12 would get it done, and lo and behold, they set up this situation that these cuts will become law if nothing happens. So to answer your first question, do I think the sequester will become a reality? If nothing is done to address this, it becomes law this year. And what that means is very deep cuts in the defense budget, cuts to the Medicare provider side, and it was a horrible setup then, it's a horrible setup now. What should have been done then? And there were some ideas to do this. We wanted to send to the states the ability to pass a balanced budget amendment to the federal Constitution. That got blocked. That got blocked by the president, it got blocked by Harry Reid. That is possibly one solution. If you're borrowing money and you continue to borrow money, you can't just keep borrowing. Think about it. It'd be like a family sitting around the table. If they're maxed out on 3 credit cards, you wouldn't say, well, let's go get another credit card, would you? That's what Washington's doing. Now, how are ways that we can get there? First way is a balanced budget amendment to the federal Constitution. I'm co-sponsor of one that we've just introduced. But you've got to find a way to get it passed and sent to the states. I voted for that last term, and it failed. It failed even in the House of Representatives. That's one way. There's another way we can get there. And I don't want to get too technical, but I'm going to talk about GDP, gross domestic product. If you look at a spending chart, historically since World War II, we have been spending at about 20% of GDP, gross domestic product. That's all the goods and services in the nation for a year. And that's a very broad definition, but we're spending at 20%. Our revenue stream was 18%. That's about a 2% gap. But now we're spending at a higher rate. We're already at 25%, and if we look at our mandatory spending chart, where's it going to go? It's going to keep going up and up and up. And if revenues are going to stay level or declining, they'll never keep up with that. So another way to do it is looking at ways through a budget amendment. Now, the Ryan budget and other budgets that we have passed bring us to a point where we ultimately keep spending to a certain percentage of gross domestic product. So it's a built-in way. Now, I would prefer a balanced budget amendment to the federal Constitution, but in looking at solutions, if you limit your spending to a certain percentage of gross domestic product, you can certainly work to curb the appetite for federal spending. Because otherwise, what will happen is revenues will stay here and spending will continue to go. And we know this. The mandatory side of the equation, with 10,000 baby boomers going on the rolls of Social Security every day, is only going to go one way. It's going to go up. So we've got to get that under control. One of the other ways is mandatory spending reforms. I've said long, and since I've been out here, I'm here to protect Social Security and Medicare. For everybody 55 and over, they've paid in, they deserve it. I don't call that an entitlement. That enrages me when you call it an entitlement. They took that out of my pay and they took that out of your all's pay. And it's just not an entitlement. But we've got to deal with that. There needs to be some reforms made for the younger people so that we preserve these programs. But all of this is going to be done to try to get us more fiscally responsible. It's not easy. I had breakfast with Paul Ryan a couple of weeks ago, and we sat down and we had the talk that we just said. And I said, Chairman is Chairman of the Budget Committee. Where can we go to start getting more fiscally responsible? And I think a great step was to make Congress pass a budget. That's why I voted for no budget, no pay. Now, I voted for a budget 2 years in a row, and I think we'll pass a budget in the House. But when the United States Senate refuses to pass a budget for 4